Hi everybody, welcome back to the Grimrose Girls series. Today I will be reading chapter 4, which is called Ella. Let's get started. The first week of school hadn't been horrifying. There were, of course, the whispers and the fact that every time Ella turned around in one of her classes, she expected to see a familiar mass of dyed dark red hair, and every time she didn't, it was like Arain had died all over again. Ella kept forgetting. Ari was still gone, and the whispers kept following. The police had asked some questions. Rory had gotten back the day Ari died. Yuki had seen her, but they hadn't talked. There was nothing further they could do but look at the death as an accident or rule it a suicide. Ella didn't believe that. She couldn't believe that. Hospitality had been a conscious choice as her elective class. Most schools didn't offer it in their curriculum anymore, but Grimrose was absurd in the same way most extensive boarding schools were. There were horseback riding classes, fencing, ballet choirs, and anything a bored-rich child could think to occupy their time. If it existed, Grimrose offered classes on it. Rory had pointed out that taking a cooking class when Ella already knew how to cook was stupid, but she still found it relaxing that she could go and not have to really learn anything. Each counter in the class sat 2 people, which meant she'd be working with a partner. Yuki and Rory had refused to take the class with her. Rory had her fencing practice. Yuki explicitly said she'd rather climb the tower on her knees than learn how to cook. Ella didn't blame them, and didn't blame the students who walked past the empty seat next to her. Finally, the teacher walked in, and Ella was relieved to see Miss Bagley, one of the oldest teachers at the school, stout with an austere gray bun, along with a sober blue dress. "Hello, darling," she said, and as a greeting smile, and Ella felt warmer, even though the seat beside her was still empty. No need to introduce myself, I hope. This is the hospitality class, and you'll be working in pairs. We're going to make pancakes today. Start simple. Please don't tell the other students, or we'll have lines waiting out here when it's over. She chuckled to herself. She picked up the cookbooks and started handing them to the class. Ella tapped the table nervously, waiting for her turn, counting the stools, glad for the even number. When Miss Bagley finally turned around to her, she noticed the empty stool. "Oh dear, you don't have a partner." "It's not a problem, Miss Bagley," Ella assured her. "Well, we partner people for a reason." Miss Bagley looked at her pointedly, like Ella was trying to make a point by working by herself, and not just that stool beside her was empty and was likely to remain so. It's not just because she was interrupted when someone else walked into the class. Stumbling in was the better way to describe it. A shock of bright red hair that for a moment sucked all the air out of Ella's lungs was the first thing she noticed, but then he straightened up, and it was only a tall, lanky boy that Ella knew well. "Sorry I'm late," he announced loudly. Ella resisted the urge to roll her eyes. Frederick Clement was an Explanatory Academy student. That meant he was rich and probably owned half of a country. It also meant he was likely to ignore her as he'd done since they were 12, even though they had been in most of the same classes growing up. Not that Ella would point that out, because that would mean she had been paying attention to him, which she definitely hadn't. "Oh, good!" exclaimed Miss Bagley. "Come sit by Miss Ashworth over here." Ella blinked. "What?" Frederick grinned, laying his bag and perching himself on the stool next to her. The teacher moved away, and Frederick started leafing through the recipe book that Ella had left untouched. "Open up to page 7, and you can start picking up the ingredients. They're already packed in the back of the room. And please remember your partner, because you'll be working together for the rest of the year." Frederick looked up at her again and smiled, oblivious. It took Ella a moment to realize she wasn't returning it. It didn't make a difference whether Frederick was there or not. And Ella picked up the ingredients from the back. She could cook pancakes with her eyes closed. She started cracking the eggs automatically. "Aren't you going to let me do anything?" "You don't need to," she answered without glancing at him. "If you're here to just fill up your schedule, I can do it." Frederick frowned at her, his red eyebrows coming together as Ella looked closer. She noticed that his nose and cheeks were lined with freckles, almost the same color as the bright orange of his ruffled hair. "Why are you assuming I'm here to only fill up my schedule? Why else would you be here?" Frederick kept looking at her, brown eyes fixed on her hands. Ella cracked the eggs. Crack, bowl, trash. Frederick was still staring, leaving her unnerved. "I feel like you're being a little unfair," he finally said, leaning on the counter next to her. "Next egg, crack, bowl, trash." You don't even know me. You're Frederick. We've gone to the same school since we were 12. Maybe there's more to it. Is there? He gasped in mock horror, shaking his head and leaving his hair even more messed up. If that was possible, maybe I know about you too. I bet, Ella muttered under her breath. To her frustration, Frederick picked up the flour and started working it through the sieve. He worked slowly, but his hands were firm. Why don't you like me? He suddenly asked as he poured the flour into a bowl through the sieve and handed it to her. I don't, she started thinking through words, her British accent more accentuated than ever. Don't like you. Which means that you like me in the most convoluted way possible, he replied. Why? Why do you feel like you're entitled to an explanation? What? I'm not entitled, he said, sounding offended, stepping back from the counter. I simply feel like I need to know. That's entitlement. No way, he protested. Entitlement? In this school? Never. Ella felt the corners of her mouth tugging up as she resisted the urge to smile at him. We are going to be partners for the rest of the year, he continued. I just want to be sure you won't turn around and stab me in the back. You really think I would stab you? You look tough for a 5-foot-tall girl. Ella wanted to shove him and almost wanted to pick up the knife. Frederick still had a smile on his face, the light shining on his freckles. It was kind of cute. Ella thought reluctantly, as if admitting that was giving in to him. I think the most dangerous weapons I've ever wielded are knitting needles. Yeah, I've seen those around. They look deadly enough. Ella blinked. You sell them? Girl walks into class with a needle the size of her arm, furiously knitting a pink scarf. You noticed too. Finally, that got a laugh out of her. The sound escaped before she could stop it. She mixed in the flour, eggs, and milk, started working it into the batter, counting every 5 beats clockwise, 1 counterclockwise. If Robert noticed this, he didn't comment. I'm not 5 feet, she said, even though that was exactly her height. And I'm not completely a jerk. Not most of the time, anyway. Fine, you win. Frederick smiled then. He didn't hold back. Since I win, do I get an explanation of why you don't like me? Ella didn't reply. I'll take a wild guess, Frederick ventured, because maybe I've hung out with Stacy. That wasn't wild at all. Well, Stacy is very clear on what she thinks of you. I bet, Ella muttered. Frederick didn't budge. If I believed her, I wouldn't have recognized you at all. No? No, you'd be a blood-drinking and flesh-eating dragon. I'm so glad you didn't listen to her. A 5-foot dragon would be very disappointing. And I'm assuming you don't drink blood. Not yet. You're young. There's still time. The conversation was light and easy for the rest of the class, and Frederick was no burden. Ella didn't let him get near the pan, but he piled up the pancakes nicely, decorating theirs with fruit and sugar and syrup, and helped with cleaning. She didn't even need to ask. The conversation was so easy that she had almost forgot that when she talked too much, people got annoyed. She knew the distinct look of when to shut up. She'd learned to recognize it from everyone around her, and Frederick hadn't given it to her once. When the pancakes were all finally ready to be presented, she turned to him. I'm sorry about earlier, she said. I was the jerk. I know what the school is like. Yeah, people can be awful. I get it. Ella smiled. At least you're honest about it. I am burdened by glorious self-awareness. I just wanted to say sorry. I didn't have to be that way. I understand, Eleanor, he said. Really, I do. You don't need to explain to me. She liked the way he said it and her name. Like he wasn't afraid. You can call me Ella. Frederick dried his hands on the napkin at the table and offered them to her. Nice to meet you, Ella. I'm Freddie. Okay, everybody, that is the end of Chapter 4 in the Grimrose Girls series. Hope to see you on Chapter 5. Bye!